Okay, welcome to the final session of the Tea Time with God, Christian education, the ministry of Wences United Church of Christ. As always, if you have any questions or comments about this session, feel free to reach out either as a YouTube comment on the replay or email me at jogrebe@gmail.com. And if you're watching this on the replay, you're in the vast majority of the class, which has been amazed at the how much adult Christian education turnout spans when you make it on demand through modern technology. In the eyes of some, this will be the most controversial session of the Tea Time with God. As Protestants, we generally do not make use of icons and rosaries, as they are generally seen as Catholic things discarded during the Reformation. In recent years, this is changing as newer generations of Protestants are starting to learn about them, if not embrace parts of them as previously lost aspects of their Christian heritage. My goal is not to try to change your mind or make you feel pressured into trying something that you are not comfortable with, but to inform you about them. This is especially important as one cannot effectively evaluate different spiritual practices until any misunderstandings we may have on them are cleared up. All I am asking is that you take the time to learn about the practices as they are authentically understood by those that practice them. I will also mention that I had the following content reviewed by both a Roman Catholic and an Orthodox Christian, both of which believed I was accurately representing their faith tradition, even though my method of explanation was non-typical at times. They still regarded it as accurate. The use of icons or artwork and images in prayer and worship is an area that we are very inconsistent with as Protestants. I've always been struck by the blatant inconsistency found within the sanctuary of Wences United Church of Christ. The sanctuary has a central white high altar with a side lectern and pulpit in a hybrid Roman and iconoclastic style. The altar has numerous sections for icons to be placed or painted in, which are left plain white. This refers to the brief iconoclast movement in the church, where icons were briefly banned and were whitewashed over. Yet in the direct contrast to our plain high altar, the stained glass windows of our church are covered in images in direct contrast to the altar. The stained glass windows include not only symbols, but also images of Jesus Christ and leaders of the Reformation, including Euclid Zwingli, Martin Luther, John Calvin, John Knox, and Philip of Melanchthon, all of which may be referred to as the unofficial saints of the Protestant Reformation from the Swiss-German perspective. As Luther began in Germany at around the same time as Zwingli, the father of the Reformed Church, began in Switzerland. Knox expanded the Reformed Church into Switzerland, and Melanchthon was a colleague and co-worker of Luther. If you have ever seen the inside of a church with a more traditional high altar, every compartment of the altar would normally have an icon or small relief sculpture, and the large section would normally contain an image or sculpture of either Christ and Mary, or the saint to which the church is named after. I am not familiar with what went into the design process of the sanctuary, but I wonder at times. It's almost as if the design committee started out with order and I wanted to make a hardcore anti-icon theological statement, but then lost the will to extend it outside of the order nave upon realizing that a plain church would look boring. So they decided to compromise by allowing images on the windows to make the church look better. This demonstrates that people tend to be visual thinkers and respond to artwork and visual reminders for inspiration. Just like it is commonplace for Bible verses to be paired with beautiful works of photography, which for practical purposes can be called contemporary Protestant icons, where we use photography of God's creation as images, just like the noteworthy Christian comments that make a thoughtful or the funny point are often seen on church bulletin boards. So upon reaching the logical conclusion that as Protestants, we have not really done away with images, but only created alternative forms, is leading some mainline Protestants to rediscover more of traditional icons. I think most of us view the traditional icons in a special way that merits a bit more of respect. Of course, all Christians take it as a given that any artwork, even the most beautiful, falls short of being able to fully represent the glory of God. The Orthodox Church often refers to icons as windows into heaven and see them as a source of inspiration to help remind people to live holy lives. This is, in my opinion, no different than modern photography. We take pictures of the people that we care about and we display pictures of our loved ones. Seeing the pictures reminds us of those we love and care about among both the living and the dead. Yet we realize that the picture is not the person, as there is no way that a single picture can fully capture the true essence of a person. Still, at the same time, we treat pictures of loved ones with respect and keep pictures of them in frames on our desks, mantels, and walls, and even in our phones, as compared to dark birds, toilets, and trash cans. The term sacred space is problematic as to, some space as sacred does not say that God is any less present somewhere else that is not designated as sacred space. Sacred space is more about setting an intention by dedicating a space for a certain focus. This is just like how it is common for college students to go to the library to study, not because it is impossible to study in their dorm rooms or another location, but because it is a quiet place set apart for reading. Much like a church sanctuary is a sacred space because we make a habit of gathering in the sanctuary for prayer and worship, which is why some people will go to an empty church to pray, not because God will not hear their prayers at home, but to be more focused in their prayers by going to a place that they see as being set apart for prayer. This is why many Christian teachers suggest setting aside a place for Bible reading and prayer in your house that is ideally not used for other things, be it an entire room or as small as a special chair in the corner or facing a window. This is because setting up a personal prayer ritual will make it easier to focus upon prayer once that ritual is established. I especially love the Orthodox tradition of having an icon corner in one's living space. An icon corner is basically the setting up a mini prayer chapel in one's house with expectation that it is not practical for most people to devote an entire room in their house for prayer, as compared to an unused corner of a room can easily be fitted with a corner table with icons hung on the walls. The table in turn can be fitted with a standing cross, candles, prayer books, a Bible, and maybe also a journal. I personally find this a very beautiful other tradition, as the space in one's apartment or house is limited, and what we do with that space reflects our values. In a similar manner, if one routinely holds an object only when praying, over time, simply holding the object will draw your focus towards prayer. So it is not the object that makes it sacred, but your use of it. So yes, if you really wanted to, you could go to the store and buy a plunger for the sole purpose of holding it when you pray with similar other results. Although there's nothing wrong with having a prayer plunger, I would personally recommend using smaller and more meaningful objects. This is something that many people do without realizing it. As commonly seen is the tendency of people to hold their Bible or finger a cross pendant they are wearing when praying. Hand crosses are another commonly available form of this portable sacred space. Most hand crosses that I have seen are slightly curved and actually fit into your hand. Olive wood from Israel is a common material that hand crosses are made of due to its biblical significance. From what I understand, the wood is a byproduct of olive farming, which requires periodic pruning of the olive trees to remain productive. So Israeli olive wood is sustainable as a byproduct of olive farming, and no olive trees are cut down in the process, as it helps provide jobs and income for Christians and churches in Israel. This is especially the case for Palestinian Christians, who are the most discriminated against minority group in Israel today. My personal hand cross is made of Bethlehem olive wood that was carved into a cross in Jerusalem. I personally make use of it during my times of contemplative prayer when I hold it. As to how much it helps my contemplative prayer practice, I honestly cannot say, as it has become part of my practice. Yes, it is possible to practice contemplative prayer without a hand cross, but it provides an extra sense of portable sacred space within the context of contemplative prayer. The most common type of physical tool that used within Christianity are rosaries or prayer beads. While most Protestants will think of the Roman Catholic rosary when they hear of rosaries, there are actually at least 4 types of Christian rosaries. Of course, the Catholic rosary is the most known type of rosary in the West. There are also Orthodox prayer ropes, paternosters, and the contemporary Anglican rosary, or Protestant prayer beads, as they are sometimes called in other Protestant circles. The oldest type of a rosary is likely the Orthodox prayer rope, which has its roots in the Desert Fathers and Mothers of the early church around the practice of the Jesus prayer. The prayer rope is sometimes called a cloakie, which is the Russian word for a prayer rope. The reason why prayer ropes are often called by the Russian name is because the Way of the Pilgrim is the most common contemporary text on the Jesus Prayer, which was written sometime in the 19th century in Russia. The Jesus Prayer is based upon the prayer of the tax collector in Jesus's parable. The Pharisee and the tax collector pray in the temple as the second model prayer of Jesus. The classic wording of the Jesus Prayer is, Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, which is sometimes expanded into Lord Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy on me, a sinner, or streamlined into Jesus, have mercy on me. The Orthodox use of the Jesus Prayer is often linked to the teachings about how to pray without ceasing. In short, if one prays the Jesus Prayer often enough throughout the day, both verbally and mentally, depending upon the situation, the prayer is likely to come to you in times of need. On the more practical level, good times to consider making use of the Jesus Prayer is during times of frustration and or temptation, when you realize that you are in increased danger of doing something that you will soon regret. Given that the act of mentally repeating the Jesus Prayer in your mind can help refocus your thoughts on something healthier. Thus, I suggest reading of The Way of the Pilgrim, which is an anonymous first-hand account of a Russian peasant who travels the countryside seeking to learn more about prayer. Even if you do not end up taking up the Jesus Prayer, it is a very delightful story of a man's determination in learning more about prayer and sharing what he learns with others. The Orthodox prayer ropes are traditionally tied out of black wool yarn and use special knots in place of beads. Each knot is tied in such a way that it is made up of 7 interwoven crosses. If you are curious, there are numerous websites and even videos on the internet that teach how to tie the knots, but I will warn you, they are very complicated and difficult, if not impossible, to follow, which is why the vast majority of Orthodox prayer ropes are made by monks and nuns, which is why I would personally suggest buying one, as it's not only simpler, but you help support a monastery or convent in the process. Prayer ropes are held in the left hand or right hand if you're left-handed as the side of weakness, as a reminder that we approach God in prayer as an act of humility in weakness and not strength. Traditional Orthodox rules of prayer call to start the day by saying the Jesus Prayer 300 times, yet at the same time, it is my understanding that the Eastern Church used the prayer rope not so much of keeping count of one's prayer, but as a tool to help one remain focused during one's prayer. The Paternoster is a lesser-known type of rosary, which was a predecessor to the modern Catholic rosary. A Paternoster consists of a cross followed by either 50 or 100 beads, and exists in both looped and chain other varieties. The name Paternoster comes from the first 2 words of the Lord's Prayer in Latin. The story of the Paternoster comes from peasant farmers being inspired by the monks' practice of praying the Psalms. The problem was the peasants were not only illiterate, but also lacked the opportunity to memorize the Psalms. At the time, the monks naturally memorized the Psalms over time as it was prayed through on a weekly cycle at the time, or daily in the case of Irish and Scottish monks. There are 150 Psalms. So if you can't pray the Psalms, pray the Lord's Prayer 150 times was the idea that somebody got. Thus, the Paternoster has 50 or 100 beads to prevent the need to consciously keep count of the number of the times that you have prayed the Lord's Prayer. Of course, now, thanks to public education, in near universal literacy, and the now trivial price of Bibles and prayer books, the Paternoster is now outdated, as anyone who wants to pray the Psalms is now able to do so. The Roman Catholic Rosary is not understood accurately by most Protestants. Contrary to what some think, the Catholic Rosary is not about Mary worship. The Rosary is a combined verbal and metra prayer. The Rosary is composed of 5 groups of 10 beads known as decades, with the larger beads separate in the decades. There are different sets of mysteries which are prayed on the Rosary. Each set of mysteries contains 5 mysteries or highlights of events from the life of Christ to meditate upon. The verbal part of the prayer is what is assigned to each prayer, but the metra part of the prayer is what one is supposed to memorize or the meditate upon when praying a given the decade of beads. So yes, every decade bead is assigned the Hail Mary prayer, which is based upon the Magnificat in the Gospel of Luke, but the emphasis is upon the mystery, not the Hail Mary prayer being prayed. Thus, the Hail Mary prayers function a bit like a timing device as one mentally reflects upon each mystery for the time it takes to verbally recite 10 Hail Mary prayers. Like the Paternoster, the Catholic Rosary comes from a time that predates public education and the common availability of Bibles and mechanical clocks for the masses. While it may be a bit of an oversimplification, the Rosary can be viewed as a type of Bible study, as it leads one through reflecting upon key events in the life of Jesus Christ, as ultimately it is Christ, not Mary, that is the central focus of the Rosary. I personally know of Protestants, both lay people and pastors, who pray the Catholic Rosary on a regular basis. Still, it is understandable that many Protestants are uncomfortable with praying the Catholic Rosary as is, due to its use of the Hail Mary and Hail Holy Queen prayers, myself included. I understand the difference between the veneration, which is defined as respect and asking the saint to pray for you, and adoration, which is worship and reserved for the triune God alone. Yet even understanding this difference, I am not able to bring myself to engage in the veneration of the Mother of my Lord. It is for this reason that a few people in the Lutheran Church aim to produce a modified form which they called the Lutheran Rosary, which made a few changes, such as replacing the Hail Mary with the Jesus prayer to make it more Protestant friendly. I am unable to share the complete Lutheran Rosary for copyright reasons, but it can be easily found with a simple internet search. Even so, I believe the real gem of the Catholic Rosary are the sets of meditations, the mysteries for meditation and reflection. I personally admire them as a creative accomplishment of Christian education in leading Christians to reflect upon the Gospels on a regular basis before most Christians had personal access to the Bible. The first are the joyful mysteries, which center around Jesus' birth and childhood. The second are the luminous, or light mysteries, which center around Jesus' earthly ministry. The third are the sorrowful mysteries, which focus upon Jesus' passion or suffering. The fourth are the glorious mysteries, which focuses upon the birth of the church and look forward to heaven as our future eternal home. The prayer practices handout includes a more detailed outline of all four sets of the mysteries. The latest development in the rosary family is that of the Anglican rosary, or Protestant prayer beads, as they are sometimes called outside of the Anglican and Episcopal circles. The Anglican rosary is a hybrid of the Catholic rosary and the Orthodox prayer rope. What sets the Anglican rosary apart is that it has no set form, but numerous sets of suggestions and encouragement to experiment and create your own. The Anglican rosary was designed around biblical imagery in mind in efforts to make it more Protestant friendly. Thus, it is made up of 4 weeks of 7 beads and 4 larger cruciform beads that separate each week. At the end, there was a cross and an extra inventory bead, which leads one into the rosary prayer in the fashion of the Book of Common Prayer's daily office. One of the more popular sets of Anglican rosary prayers is that of the Trisagion and Jesus prayer, where the Trisagion, Holy God, Holy and Mighty, Holy Immortal One, have mercy upon me, is prayed on the cruciform beads, and the Jesus prayer is prayed on the wheat beads. The King of Peace Episcopal Church has a wonderful set of Anglican rosary suggestions on their website, which I included in the handout. The Anglican rosary was created as a tool to help lead people into more contemplative prayer through the fingering of the beads and cycles of prayers to help one focus as they slow down and become more aware of the presence of God. When it comes to rosaries, I find freestyle use of the Anglican rosary to be helpful when I am struggling with prayer. When it comes to prayer, I often find that the time of biggest struggle is getting started, so using the traditional Anglican openings at the cross and inventory bead serves as a good icebreaker to get me started. After that, I will use the cruciform beads to pause and pray for a different person or the concern. When it comes to the wheat beads, I will either pray the Jesus prayer on each bead or just gradually finger through them when I am praying for different people and concerns, especially the one making use of gratitude when I thank God for the person that I am praying for at the time. Then I just cycle around the loop as many times as needed during my time of prayer, or simply stop actively using the rosary in the middle of the prayer once I've gotten started. Regardless, there was clearly something about fingering beads when praying that can help one remain focused. Thus, it is very understandable why prayer beads have a long history both within and beyond Christianity. Finally, when it comes to rosaries, if you decide to pick one up, please be respectful of the faith traditions that they come from. It is essential to remember that rosaries of other type are to be regarded as tools of prayer and not as jewelry or fidget toys. Under no circumstance should a rosary be worn as a necklace, as that is offensive to both Roman Catholic and Orthodox Christians. The best way to carry a rosary is to keep it out of sight in your pocket or bag. Of course, since rosaries predate having pockets in clothing, there are proper ways to carry them on your body should you find yourself without pockets. It is acceptable to hang a Catholic rosary on your belt. The rosary is part of the habit of most Roman Catholic monastic orders, where one is to hang the rosary on their belt when it's not actively being used in prayer. In a similar fashion, it's not only acceptable, but actually encouraged to wrap an Orthodox prayer rope around your left wrist. In fact, among Orthodox monks and nuns, there are only two proper places to have one's prayer rope. The first is in one's left hand in prayer, and the second is wrapped around one's left wrist as a reminder to the return to prayer. Finally, to keep in mind that rosaries, especially Roman Catholic rosaries, are literally consecrated objects, as they are always blessed by a priest before they are sold. So with that in mind, please treat a rosary with equal respect as you would a Bible or consecrated communion elements. If you are not aware, the proper way to dispose of a worn out or fallen apart Bible is not to throw it in the trash, but to either burn it or bury it. For broken rosaries of beyond repair, one is supposed to take it apart so that it's not obvious that it is a rosary. The cross can be saved and reused, and the beads and any wires, assuming that they're made of a plastic or metal, which is not burnable, should be buried, ideally in a place that is not likely to be walked upon, such as under a bush or in a flower bed. Or in short, to just show some basic respect to the Christian, the devotional objects in the same way that is given that we don't use American flags as doormats.
Wow, there was a lot of information in there that I did not know. So that was good.
I guess as of before there, I guess this is what I mean there with the Anglican rosary. If you see there the cruciform beads, almost like, I guess, especially if you in the theory they like to hold it like that, it practically almost makes a Celtic cross with the design of the cross and the circle around it. That one, this is an Orthodox prayer rope, and the insanely, I can't even see this up close, so it's not that each one of these knots is 7 interwoven crosses. Or as my one spiritual director, Bailey Young, put it, somebody clearly had way too much free time in their hands to figure out how to tie a knot using 7 intertwined crosses.
Wow.
And then this one was actually picked up by someone as a souvenir in the Vatican. This rosary was personally blessed by Pope Francis, so it meant that it was touched by the current Pope.
That's amazing.
And then it's just with the decades of that I guess this one is just the space of that. This is in the medieval Catholic the tradition started by, I can't remember what the nun's name was, but I know that she was canonized as a saint there. But these are dried, crushed rose petals that were turned into the beads.
Wow. That
they're unusually light. It smells very strong of roses when you don't have the plastic on it. First, if you didn't know that history, you'd probably assume that they assume that somebody had went to town spraying it with a perfume, or they soaked it in rose essential oil.
Mhm.
This is an example of the hand cross of that one there with the curved thing.
Mhm.
I
That's
guess
cool.
this is an interesting historical curiosity. Irish Pentateuch Rosary, single decade cross. Instead of the 5 decades, it's moved across the fingers. This comes from the dark period of the British Isles history when England invaded Ireland. And I think it took the Irish around 100 years to drive England out of their nation and reclaim their freedom.
Hmm.
But during that time, England tried to forcefully impose the Church of England upon the Irish Catholics to the point that they made a crime to practice Catholicism, and a death sentence if you were a Catholic priest to be caught setting foot in Ireland, with huge bounties on anyone that snitched on a Catholic priest, that led to them being captured and executed. So this is unfortunately of a dark part of the history.
Wow.
So I guess, and then if I talked about this one earlier with the introduction, this is one of the oldest icons from the Mount Sinai. And if you, and the controversy, I guess, depending upon what one believes about the Shroud of Turin, if they believe it's real, it means this is a likely authentic image of Jesus, because the image of the crucified man captured on the Shroud of Turin, according to modern digital facial recognition software, this is the image of the same person from that. And then this one is the other one that I own of Elijah. But how they have with the biblical figures is that they have little clues in them for them who it is. Like, okay, like the clues there, that's Elijah, is he's sitting by the brook as the mantor. And then if you look closely in the background, okay, there it is up at the corner. Not sure if it can show, but there was a raven holding bread. So that's the remarkable, and that Elijah is the only person that's recorded as being fed by ravens in the Bible. So that's okay. Any other questions or comments about anything? Or
Let's see. What did I put in my notes here? I like the thought of considering icons as windows into heaven and for inspiration, not as, idolizing or something like that. I like the idea of having a prayer space in your house that is a special and sacred space, and also for reflecting our values. I think that's good. I didn't realize about the number, how meaningful the number of beads are, and things like that. So that was really good. And also holding in your non-dominant hand, that I did not know, and it makes sense. The idea of showing weakness and using your non-dominant hand. I took a lot of great notes. I don't know if I have any questions, but I'm anxious to reread this section again, because there were so many things that that I want to understand better. So thank you for all of that. research you've put together and the, just all the information that you've put together to help us learn. I think that's really great. And just, to understand better,
That's right. I
things that
guess
are
that's
meaningful to other people.
that's right there. Just as well as most people in the West, we know almost nothing about the Eastern Church. Yet the biggest irony is, in some ways, oftentimes the biggest irony is there is that even with the somewhat of the minority German or the Reform of the tradition that we belong to, that to the yes of that, we have more in common with the Roman Catholics than most fellow American Protestants. But the biggest irony is, especially when it comes to communion theology, we have even more in common with the Orthodox Church than we do the Catholic Church.
That's interesting. What I really take from that is just the whole idea that we have more in common with everyone than people will sometimes admit or recognize. And, to me, it just says we should be focusing on what we have in common as opposed to, how we might see some things differently, but there is so much in common that I think that's just good meaning to remember. Yeah.
I tried to actually semi-paraphrase Archbishop Fulton Sheen.
Say that again?
You sort of paraphrased Archbishop Fulton Sheen. You probably never heard of him. He was the first television preacher, that one older, the Catholic archbishop. If it was only because some of the Protestants were feeling threatened by him of the steering away their people, that the Protestant preachers started appearing on television to teach. But one of his most, and he had shared there that every week there that he gets there numerous letters from people, basically starting out almost of apology, basically saying there that they were Protestant, watching him there, just almost semi-ashamed to there, but his comment was there, well, I have a feeling there there's probably other groups of Protestants that are watching this program, finding it to the beneficial, but they're afraid to bring it up with their Protestant friends out of fear of what they'd think of me, unknown that their Protestant friends are also watching it too. And his most famous phrase with that one there was there that he's convinced there that there's not even 5 people in the entire U.S. that hate the Catholic Church. That there's lots of people in this country that hate what they wrongly believe the Catholic Church to be, but if it was true, the Catholics would have hated it too.
That is such a good point.
He was a pioneer in the modern Protestant Catholic dialogue, a lot of which is based upon the misunderstanding, such as I only more recently learned about, most Protestants don't understand the Roman Rosary. During my chaplaincy internship at Hershey a number of years ago, I guess one of the other people that did the unit with me was a Catholic deacon. I got along with him. Now, I guess in some ways it just shows our the minority of position in some ways. I got along much better with the Catholic deacon and the Buddhist priest than I did with the other people with the evangelical Protestant backgrounds.
I think that says something great about you, John.
I agree.
Yep.
Okay, I just realized, I guess our